it really gives me a lot of passion on a day-to-day, to be honest with you, because I know that if I can get a data scientist that can go in and, I don't know, help out in a clinical trial, there's a potential chance that I'm involved in an important, I know,
Yeah.
research plan or something like that. I'm not saying that my involvement's going to be that massive, but just having that small little understanding that, okay, when this project's completed, it's not just making money for a company, it's actually going to be helping out the way that we go about our day to day.
Welcome back to the Data Strategist podcast. This is episode 5. Yeah, we're going through them pretty quick now. Today I speak to Niall, who's a principal recruitment consultant for the CPS group, and he really focuses on healthcare and roles within the healthcare industry. It was really good to hear from somebody who's not necessarily in data roles themselves, but who is finding data roles for people and placing people into roles around this industry. You know, we cover off sort of why is data important in healthcare and what does the market look like, and some tips on how to prepare for interviews that we don't really talk about. What about if you don't have a degree? What's the outlook look for you? And again, it's sort of a cheeky question at the end around AI and how it's going to change the recruitment industry. Honestly, it was a really great podcast. I was really grateful that Niall came on and gave us some really good insight into the recruitment industry, especially into sort of data and healthcare. So here you go. Okay, so thanks, Niall, for joining me on the Data Strategist podcast. And obviously, I know who you are, but it'd be good for you to introduce yourself to the millions and millions of people watching the show. So go ahead, introduce yourself.
Perfect. I would say thanks, obviously, for inviting me on this as well, Stuart. I really appreciate that. Yeah, a bit about me, really. As you mentioned there, my name's Niall, principal recruiter at CPS Group. Been specialising now within the data analytics space for about 6 years. And I say over the last 2 years, I've really put more of an emphasis on focus on healthcare analytics. It's an industry that professionally I've got a bit of a passion about because of the impact you can kind of have within the industry, but also personally as well. I think since the pandemic, I think we've all sort of looked at our own health and sort of put it into question about what do I need to change or what can I do to just stay healthy as much as possible. And naturally within the line of work that I do, I'm speaking with some talented people within this space, and it's allowed me to really understand the analytics side, but also as well healthcare. So it's really a really interesting sort of space to be in. And if I were to talk a little bit about my background, I started off in actually direct sales, doing sort of door-to-door sales, business-to-business sales, events-based promotions, purely on commission. I was a really excited young man. I think I started that about when I was 20 years old, so we're going back 10 years now. Just a company here in Cardiff, actually. It was a really exciting opportunity, actually. They sort of sold it as a management training program. Within a certain period of time, you can develop the skills to sell products and services, people's homes, shopping centres, people's businesses. You can generate X amount of profit as an individual. Then you can move into like a team leadership role where you're involved in the recruitment process when you're taking people out on interviews or what they call observation days. So they see you produce the sales over an 8-hour day. So those are some tough interviews back then, on 8-hour interviews, to say the least.
Yeah, man, that's tough.
Once you learn how to produce the numbers and sort of produce the profit for the client, you can move into, like I said, a team leader. You develop a team of 4 or 5 people, and then as a team, you produce a profit figure. I think it was about 2K 2 weeks running, which sort of showed that you can over a year produce 100 grand in profit as a small little team. And I really enjoyed that. And that took me about 2 years to really get the sort of grasp of the sales, the teaching, the training, the recruiting. And I guess that gave me my first initial insight into recruitment and kind of sparked a bit of an interest into that industry. Very different to this type of recruitment, obviously, but it was my first sort of introduction into it. So I ran that team there for maybe about 6 months here in Cardiff. Had an opportunity to move to Belfast with the manager. It was a team of 5 of us. I don't know why my mum let me do it, even though I was 22 years old. Englishman, Niall, and yeah, it was a fun experience to say the least. And then, but thankfully, I sort of hit the ground running out there and really helped build that company to about 25 sales reps, produce an X amount of profit for the clients we were working with. And then I had an opportunity then to move out to Newcastle and run one of the sales offices there. And I was 22, 23 at the time, or just turning 23. And I love the sales. I know I can go out there, speak to people, be excited, be energetic, produce the numbers. I can teach anyone to do it. But I found where I was struggling was when there was running the business aspect of it all, the HR, the payroll, financial side, and the day-to-day of what it takes to run a business. I think at the age of 22, 23, I was just out of my depth on that side. Whereas I love going out to what they call the field, but it was just so new to me, just dealing with all of that. And I had no background in it. I got a crash course on how to deal with it all, but I was like, all right, we'll figure this out. Let's see how it goes. So I did that for about 6 months, and I just sort of realized that like my passion for it is kind of like burning away, because I feel like I'm working so much to try and produce the sales, make sure the team are producing the sales, but also as well being able to learn the back end of a business and work on all hours at night in Newcastle, where I honestly didn't know anybody outside the people that I worked with who had their own friends and family that didn't want to hang out with me after a 10-hour shift. So yeah, it got to the point to where I just thought, I think it's time for me to sort of, make an adjustment or look at something different that I can sink my teeth into. And I was quite naive when I was young, because I was always told, if you move into a 9-to-5 job, you're never going to make money. You're only going to ever stay in your place. You're never going to be able to progress through the company, because you've got to wait for people to leave to move forward. So I wasn't too sort of clued up on how, I guess, the real world actually was, because of working in those types of businesses. And but I know a lot of people that left those types of companies did move into recruitment quite naturally, because it was more of quite an easy transfer of skills, should I say, into doing this. And when they were saying that the hours are, you finish at 6 o'clock, I was like, that's brilliant. I used to finish work at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, not getting home until about 11. So I was excited to be in the office 8 o'clock, leaving 6:30, 7 o'clock, and I still had time to enjoy my evenings. Obviously that's early on in our days, back 6 years ago when we used to work to that time. And then again, that's how I sort of now transitioned into recruitment. And to be honest with you, I haven't actually told anybody at CPS this. When I first started looking for work, my plan was actually to move to Australia, because I've got a few friends out in Perth that work in different factories, warehouses, but also work in the mines. And they were selling me the dream that you can make some good coin out there and really enjoy yourself, and then come back in a couple of years with a bit of money in your pocket. So that was my plan for the first year working in recruitment, was be able to save enough money to initially just get out there and have a bit of money to spend. I guess that year turned into 6 years and 2 kids. So it never really happened.
Over.
Yeah, it's exactly right. It never happened. Some would say fortunately, and some would say unfortunately, but it's worked out perfectly for me, because I'll be honest, I never thought I'd be in the sort of position that I'm in terms of progression through a company in a 6-year period, where I started at entry level, now moved into a principal recruiter here, where with options now to be able to either manage teams or be a bit more about a business manager, where I'm a bit more involved in our business development, making sure that we're getting larger client wins and securing bigger businesses than what we've done recently, which is just sort of small volume work. So yeah, I guess that's sort of where I've gotten to in terms of my trajectory. Started with direct sales, moved into recruitment, wanted to move away, but now I'm here 6 years later, happy and enjoying myself. And it's actually something I wanted to ask you as well, Stuart. I feel like we've spoken a couple of times, considering the amount of times we have. I've never actually heard your story. I'm not too sure if I can actually ask the questions. I've noticed you started as a planning assistant at Golly Slater back in 2007 or something, and now you're at director.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Data and insights. If you've got time, I'd love to hear about that trajectory.
Yeah, okay. First question I've had on the podcast. That's good. Yeah, I think, early years I was kind of doing any job that I felt I could do.
Yeah.
I qualified, or I trained as a bricklayer. I was a builder per se, and I worked quite a lot in sort of shop fitting
Mhm.
around the UK when I was younger, and then I kind of just the market crashed, and I just started taking up random jobs. So I had a job in, like you said, Golly Slater. God, that was take me back. That didn't last very long because that was a telesales type role,
Right.
uh, and then I moved from there to British Gas. So
Mhm.
I started out working there and building sort of the Excel sort of dashboards for the contact center. Because I've always had that sort of like, I've always enjoyed numbers, right? That's kind of what I've always liked doing, and I was kind of good at Excel, so I kind of just built these sort of Excel reports. And then, I went through. I was at British Gas for 5 years, and we went from working as a Excel analyst, working into the data science space. And one of my guests who's going to be coming on is actually the person that founded all that at Centrica.
Right.
Um, and yeah, it was just one of those crazy 5 years where I learned quite a lot, learned about sort of the imposter syndrome, I learned about,
Mhm.
had to build SQL skills, had to build sort of management skills as well early on. We built a couple of products like IO Tahoe, which was quite successful.
Yeah.
And then I went on from Centrica to a company called Sorensen Media,
Mhm.
and that was being their product manager for their data side of their company. So it was building sort of data products for them. So I managed the data science team, the data management platform, the um, data analytics and reporting. Um, was there for about 18 months, and I went to another company called Sigma Systems, where again, product manager looked at their sort of current product they've had with data, and again, just flew all around the world with that one. Kind of spent some time in India, Germany,
Wow.
Switzerland. Um, the job before I was in Utah for a little bit, and kind of just a wild journey of like 3-4 years of just
Amazing.
building data products and building data teams. And
Yeah.
then I kind of had a moment in my life where I was in India and I was drinking sort of Japanese import beer in a 5-star hotel.
Luxury.
And yeah, it was, the place was incredible, right?
Yeah.
It was like marble floor to ceiling. And I kind of looked over the balcony and there's about 30 people eating out of a bin. And I had that moment of realization and sort of the inequality in the world. And I don't know, I kind of had that sort of moment where I needed to change my focus and my career. Um, so I left Sigma Systems and I joined the Pobble Group. So we're a housing, social housing and care and,
Yeah.
building new houses. And, I've kind of built a team there and we're doing some amazing things. And you know, it was more for me than it was for anybody else. It was just I wanted to do something that was not about money. It was
Yeah.
more about building out something that can actually make a difference to people. And
It makes sense now. I can understand that
yeah,
trajectory now from British Gas through to Pobble about that. I guess I would never have known that without hearing that story about, I guess, that sort of a moment in time where you just realize that actually I need to be doing something more than just money here and actually
yeah.
impact, that's really impressive stuff, I have to admit.
It was a crazy time, right? I think when if we talk about inequality in the
Yeah.
world, go spend some time in India and you will see real inequality in the world,
Yeah.
and it'll hit you for six. Well, it hit me for six anyway. Maybe some other people it doesn't affect them, but for me, I was just really shocked by it
I
because
can imagine. Yeah.
in the UK we see people that are homeless and it's terrible, and we need to do something about that.
Yeah.
But then there's another level to it when you go out there.
I
The
agree.
inequality is crazy.
Yeah,
Um,
from my dad's side is Nigerian, and fortunately, that side of the family they come from the wealthy side of Nigeria, but they are in sort of a really good place in terms of where they live. But I actually reconnected with my cousin after about 20 years. He came over to the UK, and I was just catching up with him and just hearing about some of the stories in Nigeria and Africa and what it is like, where you can literally look across the road, someone's living a luxury life, but you look back over the other way, someone's got nothing, which is it is scary to think that in that close proximity that could happen.
yeah, it's shocking, really. But this is what we do, right? We decide we have to make an impact, and you're focusing on sort of healthcare. Recruiting in that sort of industry is kind of important as well, because we're not, when you look at healthcare and you look at sort of the public sector, they're behind on most private entities,
Yeah,
especially when we look at data in particular. They are light years behind,
yeah,
and your role is kind of important as well, because you need to bring people from the private sector into that sort of space, and then you also need to coach the public sector to actually accept people from
yeah,
outside.
yeah.
So I think
That's an
that's
interesting
quite a good.
challenge.
Well, it's a good segue as well, right
Yeah,
into, so why do you
yeah.
think data is important in healthcare?
Yeah, I guess there's so many answers to this question, and I could probably go on for a significant amount of time. But I guess from my understanding, data within sort of healthcare is really, really vital because it sort of holds power to transform, I guess, patient outcomes, which is, I guess, is maybe one of the main things that people talk about when they think about healthcare is, when I go in, I have a bit of an issue, I call the GP, they take however long to come back to me, then booking an appointment. How long does it actually take to get an outcome from me feeling any way? It's probably one of the most sort of talked about things right now within healthcare is how can we reduce that? How can we improve that? Sort of data allows, I guess, companies, organizations to sort of streamline their processes, and it can even shape the future of medicine and sort of change the way that we perceive how medicine is I know taken and what it does to the body, but also allows healthcare practitioners to sort of harness and sort of analyze a vast amount of data, which is probably the only way you can really gain an insight into what's really going on within, I know, diseases, what are certain patterns that happen, um, insights into, if you take certain pills for a period of time, um, what are their effects positively and negatively. But also, so this helps out with the effectiveness of treatment. If there's enough data that's, I guess, cleansed, or gathered, cleansed, analyzed, put into reports, people can really start making some strategic plans about what you should do with your health, what pills you should and shouldn't be taking, or what health sort of plan you should be on to really improve your overall health. And I think for me, data within healthcare, the hardest thing for me to get around was the fact that it's not about numbers. Like in most industries, data is numbers. What are we doing with this? What are we getting from that? But I think it's more about empowering healthcare practitioners and researchers with knowledge that can, potentially change someone's life, save somebody's life, just sort of pretty much improve the sort of well-being of everybody, really. And I think data is so important. And like you said, we're so early on in the process. Where I think most GPs are using a very old system to store all our
Yeah.
data. And I can only imagine the rows of data that they have on everybody and where it all is and how it all happens. And I think more of a personal reason why I think data is important within healthcare is I personally, about 5 years ago, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and it was something that really I had a lot of issues leading up to it, and I was like, "What's going on here? Is it my diet? Am I drinking too much? Am I not active enough? What's going on?" And it took me, like I said, about a good 2.5, maybe 3 years for them to say, "Look, what we've actually picked up is that you've actually got Crohn's disease. It started off with IBS, then a certain bacteria, then it said it was nothing, and then they said, no, actually, you've been diagnosed." So personally, if I can help out, I know, an organization that, say, for example, what the last project I worked on was a clinical trials project where, as I mentioned, they were sort of cleaning data, standardizing data, generating reports that could effectively improve or save people's lives, which when I sort of that sort of switched for me, I was like, so I can not only help myself by understanding the data here and even speaking to some of these pharmaceutical companies, these startup companies that are specializing within Crohn's, and understand what they've seen and get a different perspective than your normal NHS or public healthcare. It's it really gives me a lot of passion on a day-to-day, to be honest with you, because I know that if I can get a data scientist that can go in and, I don't know, help out in a clinical trial, there's a potential chance that I'm involved in an important, I know,
Yeah.
research plan or something like that. I'm not saying that my involvement's going to be that massive, but just having that small little understanding that, okay, when this project's completed, it's not just making money for a company, it's actually going to be helping out the way that we go about our day to day. And I think that more than anything is probably the reason why data is so important within healthcare, is that once they get some of these talented individuals that can do some amazing stuff with data, I really think it's going to help the way that we go about our day to day. And I think even more so since the pandemic, I think the government are going to really put a lot more emphasis into investment into even private and public sector healthcare companies, because I don't think they can afford another pandemic like that. You know, they need to be a bit more forward thinking, um, predicting certain things. And you can't control it, you can't stop it, but as
Yeah.
long as they've got enough information and data to go off to, I don't know, do the best that they possibly can. I think that's all going to start from the data that we already have. How can we get more from it, and what else can we do with it? So it's really
Yeah, that's
interesting.
good. I think, the role of data, or the people that work in data in healthcare, is more probably centered towards helping researchers. So it's not
Yeah,
necessarily becoming researchers themselves. It is sort of prepping data, building the reports for researchers
yeah,
to sort of correlate with or change or work out their own hypothesis if it's correct or not. It's
yeah.
not necessarily to replace researchers or anything like that. It is kind of like adding tools to the armory for researchers, and that's really important to understand. So when data people look at these sorts of roles, they're not looking at it and going, well, I'm not going to be, I don't want to be responsible for the
Yeah,
research of a whole clinical trial, but you're there as a sort of somebody who can actually help gather that data quicker for a researcher, paid sort of PhD, or anybody like that who can translate that data
yeah.
or translate the outcome into something more tangible and changes to the trial itself. So I think sometimes people get a little bit confused about what role data plays in it. It's not
I
to
agree.
replace sort of researchers. It's kind of just to enhance the process, essentially.
I absolutely agree with you. And I will be honest, when I first started at looking at it, I did go down the route of the NHS. How can I help out, and how can I provide some talented individuals for that? And I think, yeah, bar from obviously all the frameworks that are involved to get onto those opportunities, I think NHS right now, they're in a position where if they change too much too soon, it could cause a few issues right now. So I think that's a bit more of a slower burner, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Whereas more of my focus is, pharmaceutical companies that are, I don't know, detecting cancer at its earliest stage and doing new ways of doing blood tests. Because I'm working with one pharmaceutical companies now who, I think the NHS, when they do a cancer test, they can do up to 3 cancers in one blood test.
Mm.
Whereas with this pharmaceutical company that are about to partner with NHS, they can do up to 50 in one test, and it's really improving the I guess the ratios of the chance of someone surviving or living longer based upon these early detections. And that's mainly my focus. It is more the pharmaceuticals or those software companies that are supplying equipment to the NHS, electronic health boards, and just trying to change things up like that. And I think that's the main reason. And when I learned about the pain points that happen, patient outcomes, how frustrating is it when you're waiting ages to find out what's going on, or
Yeah.
the cost to do things if you're going privately, or even the cost to the NHS if you use their services. How can data help to not necessarily reduce it, because it's not going to be the only way you can, but look at ways to improve the, I guess, operational efficiencies, and just really just improve the overall function of it all. When again, that's not going to be the job of a data individual. That person is going to provide the information to, like you mentioned, researchers and the powers that be to make those changes. But they reckon over the next, I think 2021 to 2028, they reckon there's going to be like a compounded annual sort of growth rate of around 25% within healthcare analytics. So it's really going to be extremely fast how we just see a change within this space. So I'm glad that I'm on it quite early and understanding how it all works.
Well, you are kind of leaping into the next sort of segment, right? Where we're talking about what does the market look like, and that growth is hopefully going to help, right, build this market sort of up. But what sort of currently though, what are people looking for now? Is it engineers, scientists, analysts? What's the market itself looking like at the moment?
Yeah, I'll say this is I guess it's very subjective, I think, because based upon what I'm seeing from obviously I guess the market that I'm targeting,
Yeah,
it's a mixture of your data analysts, people that can analyze a vast amount of data that will allow either a healthcare provider like the NHS or a private organization just get back up to date. Because I've noticed a lot of conversations I'm having with managers is that we've got such a backlog of work that we just need some assistance of some data analysts that can, I know, look at our SQL server, that can use SSMS, that can gather all this information, put it onto a nice report using Power BI or some sort of visualization tool, and just get us to a position where we know where we're at. So I would say one of the main roles that they're looking at, I think the last placement I did was a data analyst, someone who would do that and help an organization get themselves back up to scratch. And another one as well, data engineers. I've noticed within more of the private side, that's something that they're really looking at, increasing headcount. And I guess sometimes companies do have a bit of a misconception of what a data engineer and a data scientist is, and sort of the differences and what the day-to-day. So they put a data engineer who's going to be doing, I don't know, using Python algorithms and stuff that are not quite what a data engineer is going to be doing. Obviously, I know Python is something that they use, but not from an engineering perspective. And I think that's the biggest challenge that companies are facing with the market right now, is understanding the difference between what an engineer is going to do and what a scientist is going to do for you. And that's what I've noticed as well. But I would say the market, it's based on who you're speaking to as well. I find that the first sort of 5 to 6 months of the year, I noticed with the, I guess, public's interest in AI, for example, ChatGPT and how much that sort of took off. I noticed that a lot of companies, for, I guess, economic reasons, were trying to utilize AI to sort of save them some money. Can we use this to, I don't know, deal with our reports and do our development and help us out? And I think that kind of affected the market to the point to where they felt that they can let go of some people and get a machine to do the work. Whereas I found now that when they've probably trialed that out a bit, they realize that actually we need some human interaction here to actually understand what's really going on. And I would say since maybe around end of May, I have noticed that there's a significant increase in terms of contract jobs that we're receiving within data, but also as well on the job boards. When I look on the job boards now, there's a significant more amount of data roles. And I think the biggest challenge that this year's faced is we've signed some terms of business with some of the big consultancies, the big four. And normally when we work with these organizations, there's an influx of jobs across all verticals, data, development, test, or everything. Whereas we've noticed within data specifically, that was the least amount of roles that were released from the big four. And from my experience, when I've looked at the market, if your big companies are working on massive projects, normally that affects the rest of the market because people jump onto those projects, they help out, they win a bit of business, they do a particular part of work. And because those organizations at the start of the year didn't have a significant amount of roles going, that's what I felt knocked on to the rest of the market. But I have noticed, like I said, a lot of jobs have improved. I reckon September time is going to be a very busy time for contract and perm. Once people have come off their holiday buzz over August, if they come back in September, realize actually I've still got some deadlines I've got to hit. I don't want to miss out on this. And I've also noticed a unique but exciting challenge now, mainly for, I guess, myself as a recruiter and even as yourself as a hiring manager, is when you're getting an average CV now, there's so much more talent available than it has been for a very long time. So it's a case where the standards and the expectations have risen in terms of when I receive a CV, I need to make sure that I can be a bit more picky now, because I am getting, I'm not saying previous years you're not getting the same quality, but some of these really good talented people have always been in long-term contracts, permanent positions, not looking at moving on. but unfortunately, we all know a lot of people have lost their jobs this year, and there's a lot of talented individuals that are available. I'm actually working with a Power BI developer that actually helped out, was one of 5 people to write questions on some of the Power BI and Azure exams. And he's someone that I've tried to get into a contract for about 4 years, but I've never been able to because he's always in a contract or going straight into another one. And he struggled to find positions. And I guess thankfully for me, I was able to place him because he was available. But normally he just goes straight into a role. And for me, that's a big determining factor of how the market is those individuals that are normally just straight into a role. They're taking an extra month, 2, maybe 3 months to secure something. But it definitely looks like there is a change in the market, and I guess that kind of gives me an opportunity to hear it from somebody on the other side. And I hope you don't mind me asking you questions as well. But obviously, from your position, obviously over at Pobble, Director of Data and Insight, and how are you finding the market at the moment? Do you see projects going on? Do you hear people talking about things coming up? What's going on?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I know there's a bigger drive in this sector to
Yeah.
become more data driven, and that's throughout the UK, right? Everybody wants to become data driven. What they're probably missing at the moment is data leadership. So they're kind of missing out on some of the key aspects of it. They kind of put data in sort of different roles. So like an IT manager will have a data analyst in there, and they're not really building upon that. And what
Yeah.
the sector that I work in needs is more data leadership roles to kind of elevate the position of data within the company. And this is what we've done really well at Pobble, is we've elevated it to sort of a senior level now.
Brilliant.
And we have the conversation at the table of where decisions are made. So rather than it being the IT manager going off to do that, so I think the first step in this sector is we need to hire more data leaders. And that's more
Yeah.
of a business decision that other companies need to make.
Yeah.
To me personally, though, I always look I go out and look for the person that I would like to work with and the type of people that I'd like to work with. I've got quite a big sort of network, if you like, of data analysts, engineers, and stuff. So it's easy for me to put a job advert out, and then I'm going to get a lot of people that I've kind of know of or work with or met at
Yeah.
sort of events and stuff. So it's easier for me to sort of promote those sorts of roles. But that if you don't have those sorts of people in your organization that have that network, they would have to go to a recruitment agency, and or they'd have to try and have an internal team
Yeah.
to do it. So I think it's a growing market. It will be a growing market, and I think what people also need to understand is when it comes to data is it's not about making other people redundant through automation. It's actually about removing the mundane tasks that people do.
Yeah.
So if you're doing data entry work because the two systems don't talk to each other, or you're doing data entry because you have to do it 3 times into 3 different systems,
Mhm.
the role of data is to make that part of your job automated so you can focus more on the people aspect.
No,
And people get kind of worried when we say automation. We're not automating jobs. We're not looking to disperse everybody. What we're looking to do is make sure that you focus more on the customer and we focus more on the mundane, because we can automate that task, and that's quite an enjoyable task for us to do.
Yeah.
So I think that's what housing associations in particular are probably going to be focusing on over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of really it. And I kind of just look for more when I'm doing interviews. I look for more personality types and
Yeah.
seeing how, well, we'll come on to like how would you or people prepare for interviews, but I think really I want people with more enthusiasm and treat this sort of as a vocation, essentially. It's something that
Yeah.
you're just not doing because you're getting paid for it. It's something that you're doing because you want to improve, you want to move forward, you want to
There's a
sort of
real
be the
passion there.
best. Yeah, exactly. So when you sort of prepare people, how
Yeah.
do you get, when you say they're coming to interview for me, how would you get them to prepare to interview with myself?
Yeah. This is something that I actually really do enjoy is preparing candidates for interviews. And a bit of a structure that I normally would go through is, most agencies would do this anyway, is we'll, for example, if you obviously had a candidate who's interviewing with yourself, I'll get a LinkedIn profile of yours, chuck it into an email so they can see exactly who you are, give them that little opportunity to see a face, put a bit more of a human aspect behind how this interview is. Because I find if candidates go into interviews without seeing some form of a face of the person they're speaking with, it does make it a little bit like, oh, as soon as someone pops up, it's like, oh crap, what's going on here? Whereas if there's a
Yeah,
bit
yeah.
more of make it a bit more human from the start, it just makes it a little bit more warmer for the individual. And I always suggest that person to connect with them on LinkedIn to make sure that they can see who you are as well. And again, that just allows that initial call to be a whole lot warmer going into it. But off the back of that, I always suggest to research the company. Simple stuff, really. Going onto Google, put the company name in. You've got this little tab, so you've got news and X, Y, and Z. Click onto the news, see if there's anything that's recently been announced. I don't know, projects that have been won, completed, goals that have been hit. Just general thing to try and understand the company a lot more, values, and get a good understanding of the business. Then I would suggest go back onto LinkedIn, search a company again, and just look at the people that work there. So if you're going for a data engineer role, try and pick out 3 or 4 data engineers that actually work at, say, for example, Pobble. Try and see if they've got anything about tech stack, what they've been working on. At least it gives them that additional knowledge and preparation. So when they get onto the call, they're able to refer to, oh, I know that you use Python, I know that you use Azure, I know that these are the projects you're working on. It just gives them a bit of it paints a picture for them before they go into a conversation. And off the back of that, it's just making sure that you're comfortable with I guess, jumping on a video. That's another thing, is that a lot of people are not so comfortable being on a video. So I always like to try and get on a little conversation with them first to say, look,
So people are still like that, even though we've gone through COVID and,
I wouldn't
you
say so
know,
much contractors are, but I've had more people who are at that data analyst level who are maybe a year or two into their career and they've had their first little opportunity to work with a company and then they're moving on to something bigger. I've noticed that they seem confident, but when you actually start getting them on the call, there is a little bit of, I don't even know how to pinpoint it. There is a bit of more people who are a bit more junior going into interviews, I would say, not so much people who are experienced.
oh, well.
So I do like to get on a little video call just to test that, because again, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't happen. 9 times out of 10, people are comfortable, they're used to it, let's go ahead. But there are a few people who've luckily been in roles throughout this entire time and not actually had to do interviews until start of this year when they've actually lost their jobs. And it's trying to help those individuals to get a bit more confident and comfortable on the camera, seeing themselves, potentially hearing their own voice, etc. That's something else that I like doing. But I guess as well, it's the most important thing I say, you've got dress professionally, be appropriate on the interview. We've had some funny stories about how I had an interview last week, actually. It was terrible this happened. Client asked, I know you're currently working with X, Y, and Z. Is there a chance they extend you? Candidate said yes. Because, okay, so if we were to offer you the role and they offered you an extension, which one would you accept? And sort of the candidate came back and said, whoever pays me the most money. And it's, you know what, you can say that to me as a recruiter. I can understand why
Yeah.
that's a driver and I get it from a contract perspective, but that was the determining factor why someone didn't get a role, was just due to that. They felt like there wasn't enough buy-in, enthusiasm, and sort of commitment to them. And all that the client was trying to do was just to gauge where that person was at, and it kind of goes back to my initial point about the quality of profiles that are available now. They can be a bit more picky about who they offer based upon responses, because there are some quality people out there. And
There's a
so, yeah,
lot more competitive market now than it is
absolutely.
at any time. I think what people need to realize is if you go in and you're just going to talk about money,
Yeah.
that hiring manager is going to go, well, I'm probably
Mm.
not going to keep you long enough. So I'm not going to invest the next 12, 18 months of my time coaching you and improving your career if you're solely focused on money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can get from a mechanic's perspective, especially in the contract space, people do want to be making more and more money, but there's also a way of going about doing that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not something that's coming out to me. You've got to be a bit more savvy with that. But I think the most important thing is just being yourself. I think there is too much emphasis on you have to be a certain way. You've got to do certain things during an interview. Because there's a lot of stuff about sort of eating an eye stuff where it's all about making sure that you're making everybody comfortable. You have to be yourself, because if you're not yourself
Yeah.
throughout it, it's going to be really hard to continue on working, not being who you actually are. So that's I'll say how I would sort of initially prepare candidates for calls. And giving them the additional stuff that they need.
Yeah, nice. So with the amount of obviously talent that's out there now,
Yeah.
the candidates are getting better. They're getting more experience. They're getting more sort of, more opportunities as well. But what if people don't have a degree? What do they, how do they fare up in the market with people who have just finished university, finished their masters, finished a PhD for whatever? How would they fare against other people?
Yeah.
Are you seeing anything in that sort of industry, like sort of side of it?
Yeah, again, I think this is very subjective to, I guess, my own experience and how I've dealt with candidates. But for example, we've worked with candidates within the actuarial science space, where it's all about mathematics, statistics, etc. If somebody was going down that route, I would say a degree is probably one of the most important things,
Yeah.
with math and statistics to really understand, I guess, that the base of it. And if someone was going for the same job and they had a degree, a master's, a PhD within those skill sets, and someone who didn't for that level of work, I would say someone would probably fall short. However, across the entire data function, and you've probably seen this yourself now, there are so many good courses that you can take on SQL, Power BI, the basics of data analytics that can really give you a strong foundation, to really understand what it takes to be a data analyst, data engineer, etc. So I don't necessarily say it's a determining factor for a lot of roles, but I find I used to speak with one of these managers many, many years ago. I think something that he used to say to me was, a degree will open a door, but your skills will sort of progress you further, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And something like that really sort of resonated with myself and some of the candidates I speak to. It's if you haven't got the degree, you've really got to be able to showcase your problem solving skills, really draw from real life scenarios, or working scenarios, should I say, where you've had to solve a problem that's related to data. Showcase your ability to find hidden gems within data. I think that's
Yeah.
something that would be so much more valuable than, okay, I have a PhD in computer science, but I can never find you that hidden gem because I don't practically know how to do the things. And I think as well, it's just the hunger to learn as well. I think if you've shown that at an earlier stage, like you just mentioned a little bit before, how if someone's just all about money, you're not going to want to invest your time in teaching and training and developing that person. But if you're seeing somebody who's there, first in, last out, asking all the right questions, you're probably going to want to spend more time with that person because you know that
Yeah,
their
for sure.
enthusiasm is there, and that they're eager to learn. So I guess it's a really interesting one, really, because don't get me wrong, a degree will probably help you in that initial phase, because I guess it shows that you have the discipline to start something, digest the information, and complete something, which is, I guess, the most important thing within work now is results and what you get in the end. But again, not the determining factor. You've got to really come up with ways to showcase your, again, problem solving skills, your ability to look at certain data sets to find something that a company or an individual hasn't seen before, and really being hungry to learn, and just digest as much information as possible. And I guess that's my thoughts on the degrees. It does help, but it's not a determining factor.
Yeah, and I think it depends on your age as well, probably. If you're fresh out of university, a degree helps.
Of course.
But if you're, say, later on, our age, above, it becomes less relevant. So if I did a computer science degree when I was 18, I'd have been
Yeah.
learning Java and I'd have learned object oriented programming, which would have given me a good foundation in code and how it works, but
Mm-hmm.
it would be completely sort of irrelevant to what I do now, apart
Yeah.
from bits of it. But it
Cool.
wouldn't. I'd be writing Python now rather than Java, so
That's
it,
really
it
good point.
becomes less relevant the older you get, I think.
Yeah. No, I like the
But
insight actually. That's a very valuable point. The older I guess the degree, the more the person has to probably pick up on some different skills and where the market's gone. So that's a really interesting insight there. I really appreciate that.
well, I think me personally, I wish I did do a degree
Yeah.
because I think it would have given me a better foundation to move forward, and I wouldn't have felt like I had to catch up with everybody else.
Yeah.
So because I didn't have a degree, joining sort of the team down in London in Centrica, I was way behind everybody else, and I had to teach. I didn't just have to do my 9 to 5 job. I then had to work after to teach myself to get up to scratch with everybody else. And the truth
Yeah.
is, you're never going to get up to scratch with everybody else, because whilst you're doing that, they're
Yeah.
also advancing
Yeah.
their skill set. So
Yeah.
you're always going to be behind, always feel like you're behind. So I think it's, even though I wish I did do a degree, I wouldn't hold it against somebody who's had
Yeah.
10 years experience of trying to self teach and bring that up. I think that's a really important skill set as
Really,
well,
yeah.
because you know that they're going to keep going.
Yeah.
You know that they, and that's not saying people with degrees don't, but I think
Of course.
they've
And I think
shown that
you,
they're willing to do that.
yeah, I think you nailed it on the head earlier on when you're talking about your earlier days where you had an eye for data, an eye for math, and certain things that you sort of naturally were doing. And I think those individuals are great who don't have degrees because it's more of a passion. It's more of I actually enjoy doing this, and almost naturally quite gifted at this. And I think you're the perfect example that you don't need a degree to get to certain levels. So I guess you answered
Wow.
that question for us.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there you are then. um, yeah, I guess I did. So AI, huge
Ah,
topic at the moment across every sector
yeah,
worldwide. People now have got AI in the palm of their hands with something like Chat GPT.
yeah,
And this is a bit of a question for you, but when I look at the recruitment consultant industry,
mhm,
it is a transaction between two people,
yeah,
the candidate and the employer. With the advancement of AI, what does that leave? Where does that leave the recruitment business? Because obviously, this, to me, as a data person, I could probably automate this in theory between a candidate and employer
yeah,
by just doing questionnaires and whatever. So what's the role of the recruitment consultant going to be looking like
yeah.
with
This
AI
is something that
advancement?
a lot of us have been talking about here in the office since the boom of the start of the year with ChatGPT and what you can do with AI now. I personally think, from a recruitment perspective or recruitment consultant's perspective, it is quite thrilling. It's a really an exciting world to be in if you accept it and understand that regardless of what we try and do, say, or act, it's coming, like it's going to happen.
Yeah,
I personally think using AI tools to harness some of the, like you mentioned, some of the mundane work where you've got to be repeating the same actions, searching for certain skill sets, and qualifying CVs. I think AI now, like you mentioned there, you can add questions for them to ask candidates, and you'll get the answers that you need. They can search for CVs for you. They can qualify on paper the perfect person for a requirement that you have. So I think where it's going to really benefit recruiters is people who can have a good automation on that side where it's generating CVs, matching to your requirements, talent pooling candidates based upon location. So you've got a large pool of candidates where they've been sent a list of questions on, what's your availability, where you based, on site, remote, what rates you're looking for, and almost populate that for you automatically. I think that's going to save the average recruiter hours and hours per week, actually dealing with human beings and building relationships where I don't think there's probably going to be a time when AI is going to be your best pal. You're not going to go out and
yeah.
you're not going to go to the pub, or you're not going to go for a meal with a robot. Do you know what I mean? Where
Never say never,
I
right?
shouldn't have said that because now I have. Watch someone get great where you can. But I think that there is something that is the most important thing about it. It's the human-centric aspect of recruitment. I don't think will be replaced anytime soon. Where I actually build a relationship with you over the years, and even sometimes speaking to candidates. Sometimes candidates won't tell you that they've got 3 other interviews on the go, even if you ask them the question. They only tell you over a period of time when you've built a relationship, trust, and they know that something is beneficial to them. And
Mm.
I don't think a piece of software would necessarily get that out of them straight away. Do you know what I mean? They'll probably ask the question, and if they say no, that's it. They won't sort of probe a little bit deeper, try and build a bit more rapport to break down the guard a bit and understand what their situation is. So if an offer does come down the line, there's no surprises that they've accepted something else. So I personally find it thrilling. I do really think I utilize AI a lot. It's something that I'm just trying to really get my head around, because I think the worst thing that a recruiter can do is just sort of turn it away and be like, no, I don't want anything to do with this. It's going to take my job. I'm not going to be out of work. If you have that mindset with AI, then it's going to take your job. But yeah,
Yeah,
I think
well, you'll become blockbusters, right? You
exactly,
will
yeah.
you will be blockbusters of recruitment
Yeah,
industry.
I think
So
that, yeah, exactly. That's a perfect analogy of it. I think Blockbuster said Netflix will never compete with us, and boom, they are the reason why Blockbusters
yeah,
unfortunately went out of business. And I personally am trying to find way. I'm still learning about it. I actually learned yesterday that there's AI on Spotify now. There's an AI DJ that you can press it, and it literally plays all your music that's supposed you listen to throughout the year. So personally, I'm accepting it. I'm embracing it. I'm trying to learn ways to add it into my day to day, but also allow me an opportunity to be more relationship focused, which I personally I enjoy the most about this business. It's
mm,
don't get me wrong, I love making placements, commissions, earnings, and then being able to enjoy yourself in the personal life with the money that you can make in recruitment. But there's an aspect of actually building relationships with people that personally I never thought I would ever be able to build relationships with, people who are directors and people who are business owners and people who are um, very informed about what's going on in the world. Whereas I personally, that's the aspect that I love the most about recruitment, is the relationship building. It's going to give me that opportunity to spend more time doing that than it is that transactional thing where it's all about,
yeah.
I'm going to send you a CV, you send me a payment. Where, don't get me wrong, I love doing it, but the relationship side, I think, is so key, and it's only going to help out if people utilize AI correctly.
I think that's the right mindset to have. I think a lot of
Mm.
people get scared. There's a lot of scaremongering that I see a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
is AI is going to replace us. AI is going to have this big job displacement. But what people are not thinking about is, okay, my job as today doesn't won't be the same.
yeah,
But if I focus my job on more of the people side and make that unique, because that's what people are lacking in today's world, essentially, is that human one-to-one connection. So
100%.
if you make your business more focused on that rather than, you know, a transaction between two, you will survive the AI
Completely.
industry.
Yeah,
And it's really important. I think housing and social care and healthcare really need to take that mindset.
mhm,
Is change is coming. It's inevitable change. If you don't utilize it in the right way, it will replace you.
yeah,
And that's what people don't understand when they say that, oh, we're not going to do anything with it, or it won't affect us. It'll pass you by and you will be gone from that. But if you
agree.
embrace it to say, remove the mundane, put people back in customer focused roles and get that back to one interaction with people, you will survive this next
Agree.
wave of
What's going to
AI
And I
revolution.
was speaking with our associate director yesterday, but literally about this particular question, just to sort of get some ideas and go back and forth with him. And he mentioned something quite important. He said that, like, let's just say, for example, AI did take everybody's jobs. Um, what are the government going to do about all the people that are sitting at home doing nothing? And what, are they just not going to step in? They're not going to realize this is actually affecting people quite significantly. Um, who's going to make sure these people got money? Like they still need to go out and
Yeah.
spend the money for the economy to do what it needs to do. So I think that's another point. I do think if there was ever a point in time where it looked like AI was so advanced, it can do everything that we just discussed it couldn't, I do think there will be some form of, I don't know, legislation or something that will come in to make sure that, hold on, let's make sure that we have some control and a grasp over the direction that this is going down. So I can understand why people are afraid of it. But the worst thing you can do is just buy into that and then just almost freak yourself out and realize that I'm not going to be the job in 2, 3, 4 years' time. You're better for
Yeah.
embracing it, understanding it, and going from
AI has been around for a long time. It's not
there.
new.
Yeah.
When you talked about the Spotify playlist, Amazon have been doing this for years when they
Mm.
show you your next recommendation model of, I just bought a fridge. Oh, or maybe you need a new microwave to match your fridge, right?
Yeah.
It's been doing it for years. What we've got now is just AI is publicly available,
Yeah.
which is not something that's been happened before. I don't know. There is talk about how quick this will happen, and we are sort of on that preface now of when, if you remember when the internet first started, there was kind of this technology boom, then
Yeah.
social media boom.
Hmm.
We're at that preface again where we're expecting another boom, but I don't think many people know what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I think people need to be adaptable to how that situation changes. And again, focus more on the people side of stuff. If
Hmm.
you don't focus on that, you'll be
And I think
out of.
at CPS, we when the pandemic started, I think this is where we put a lot more emphasis on that human aspect here. It's everyone's freaking out right now. Everyone's like, "Oh, what's going on with our jobs? How are we going to work? How's this going to work from home?" But I think the only way that we really got through that was this aspect of engagement, human, figuring it out, talking, breaking everything down. Whereas, don't get me wrong, AI could probably do something like it, but I don't think it would be as sustainable as it is as an actual human interaction and really getting to the bottom of it. So, and that's something that we've focused on at CPS mainly for the last 3-4 years. We know that we can send you CVs, find you the right candidates, but what else can we be doing? How can we become more of the consultant than
Yeah.
just recruiter? And that's been more of an emphasis that all of us have done because we all can do a transaction, but how can we actually consult businesses and help people like yourself improve your team's overall environment, etc.
Awesome. Hey, look, man, this has been a good hour, right? I
It was
think
about.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
No
So
problem.
thank you for coming on, mate. It's been,
I
really
appreciate that.
insightful, and I appreciate you taking the time out.
No, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm interested to see where this podcast goes for you because it's some interesting people that you had on. I watched Dave's one yesterday. That was really insightful in terms of the AI world and energy and what he's been up to. So, really looking forward to seeing some of the other people.